Way of Openness is a set of dialogue conventions developed by Randall Paul at the Foundation for Religious Diplomacy. Randall's worldview, which stems from his Latter-day Saint theology and his generous heart, is that deep disagreements between people do not indicate that one person is very righteous and the other very wicked, or that one person is very smart and the other person very stupid. Rather, deep disagreements between people are symptomatic of their mutual goodness, their desire to enact what is right in the world, and their unwillingness to compromise their values and beliefs about what people need to flourish. The goal for productive dialogue is not compromise, but trust. The first and most critical element of a deep dialogue actually happens before the dialogue itself. Randall has taught me that prior to any dialogue on a controversial topic or question, you must first build a relationship between the interlocutors, preferably over food, preferably over amazing food, lasting over an hour and a half. In this first meeting, the dialogue topic is off the table. The only question that you have to answer, taking equal time, is this: how did you come to your deepest beliefs? When people answer this question honestly, it begins to build a relationship and establish trust. That's a foundation for the dialogue in the future. Now, here are the 10 conventions of dialogue, which the Foundation for Religious Diplomacy calls the Way of Openness. You can check these out in greater detail at the Foundation's website. I'll provide a link here. They are: be honest. This means that we're candid with each other. Be kind. Kindness is something that you can feel from someone. If it's faked, if there's false respect, that people can immediately tell. It's something that you can feel. It builds trust. Listen well. Listening well doesn't mean just waiting for a break so that you can insert your thoughts. It means intensely focusing on the person and trying to understand what they're trying to say and how they feel about it. Share the floor. This means basically taking equal time. When you hog the time, when you do all the talking and don't allow any time for someone else, you show arrogance and you show fear, unwillingness to share with others, and also fear that if they have more time, they'll be able to kind of overwhelm what you're saying. Presume goodwill. This means that until proven otherwise, you assume that the person is a pretty good person who has your interests at heart. You assume that they're not out to get you. They don't have some sort of evil plot. 6 is acknowledge the differences. This means that we acknowledge that we have real differences. We don't only have to talk about common ground. Where we disagree, where we differ, we can say this, and we can disclose these differences so that we don't have to guess at what the other people are thinking. Answer the tough questions. Sometimes when we get a tough question, we know we're going to kind of have to answer in a way that, I don't know, it might put us in a different light or in a negative light, or if it's a really tough question, sometimes we want to dodge it. But by answering the tough questions, we build trust. Give credit where credit is due. Compliments nowadays are a dime a dozen, but when you get a compliment from someone who's a critic or a rival, it means a lot, and it also helps to build trust. Speak only for yourself. We don't want people to speak for us, to tell us what we actually believe, what we actually think. We speak only for ourselves, and we listen when people tell us what they believe, what they think. We also don't want to take on the burden of representing our entire tribe or community. We speak only for ourselves in these dialogues. Last of all, keep private things private. This is another foundation of trust. We don't want, if we tell someone something in confidence, we don't want to see it blogged all over the internet the next morning. So these are 10 conventions for dialogue called the Way of Openness. Now, how do they actually work in practice? In 2008, the Prop 8 battle was fought in California. Proposition 8 would ban same-sex marriage. Religious groups and individuals engaged on both sides of this ballot measure, as well as other community groups. In the critical final weeks leading up to the election, I happened to attend a Los Angeles interfaith event. It was held at a Latter-day Saint meeting house in West LA because a Latter-day Saint public affairs official was receiving an award for building bridges in the community. The cultural hall was filled with banners about the golden rule, how it existed in every religion and culture. Look what we have in common, these banners proclaimed. Treat others the way you would like others to treat you. What you do not wish for yourself, do not inflict on others, etc., etc. And yet, the lesbian Anglican priest, the progressive Jewish rabbi, the United Methodist pastor, and many others working to oppose Prop 8 sat in their seats, clapping politely as the Latter-day Saint leader working to pass Prop 8 accepted his award. But their eyes and lips were grim. They sat stiffly in their metal folding chairs. A feeling of heaviness was in the air. A massive elephant was in the room. At this moment, I had an epiphany. It's not enough to be able to talk about what we have in common. We also have to get good about talking about how we disagree. In the aftermath of Prop 8, anger erupted across California. People lost friends and alienated family members as they denounced each other's positions. The following year, I arranged a collaboration between the City of Los Angeles Human Relations Commission and the Foundation for Religious Diplomacy, using the dialogue conventions of the Way of Openness. The dialogue took place between 8 Los Angeles religious leaders in 2010. Later in 2012, we reconvened for a second round of dialogue with mostly the same people. The City of Los Angeles made a documentary about it. I will play the first 4 minutes here.
Presenting the views of their respective church affiliations. Oftentimes, as a society, we are caught in intense and highly emotional differences. At times, they are framed as clash of values, which suggest that the outcome is a zero sum in which only one side can exist and be accepted. This is exactly how the issue of same-sex marriage is being framed. As protesters for both sides took to the streets and courtrooms, the fabric of trust and civility that allows our society to thrive was being shredded before our eyes.
The really hard thing about this period of time was that I had friends and family on both sides of the issue, and they were kind, they were generous, they were wonderful people. But then when it came to this one issue, when they would start to talk about this issue, they would demonize people on the other side as liars or haters or bigots. And it was very painful. And I felt there's got to be a way that we can talk about this. And I thought we should be able to start with people of faith, people who believe in a God who commands us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We should be able, if we have this common belief, we should be able to have a civil conversation. So why isn't this happening, and how can we create a space for it? It was a personal priority for me.
Perhaps one of the most challenging tasks was to get the buy-in from a small group of faith leaders on various sides of the issue to come together. This process took much time, dedication, and strong convictions. In the midst of the intensity of Prop 8 in 2010, a private and intimate dialogue was convened by the City of Los Angeles Human Relations Commission. 8 faith leaders from various denominations and sides of the issue came together. The purpose of the dialogue is not to convert or change personal beliefs. Rather, it is to see the humanity in the other and how best to help congregations engage and cope. Both the City Human Relations Commission and the Foundation for Religious Diplomacy played a role in facilitating the dialogue.
I'm Randall Paul. I'm the president of the Foundation for Religious Diplomacy, and the foundation has been asked to consult with the City of Los Angeles on a very important dialogue over the religious foundations for people's position on Prop 8. The dialogue model that we use is called the Way of Openness. It's based on disclosure of your deepest motives as well as your deepest beliefs. We have found when we bring together face-to-face religious rivals who might see each other as enemies or suspicious opponents at best, when they engage and find that the other person's motive is indeed one that includes the best interest of the other party, everything changes. They begin to put their wall of suspicion down and start to talk in a real fashion about what matters most to them. And our goal, of course, is to create this new level of trust and even friendship. Can we actually be friends and adversaries at the same time? The answer is yes.
In these dialogues, people did not pull punches. People were kind, but they told each other what they really believed, even if it was hard to hear. I will play a short clip of a conversation between Judy Gilliland, a Latter-day Saint and a prominent interfaith leader in Los Angeles, and Dr. Neil Thomas, then the pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church of Los Angeles that ministers primarily to the LGBTQ community.
I believe that we listen to God, and I know that the answers can come differently to different people, and that we can't judge, and we can't put somebody down for having a different answer than we do.
And I know you don't want to judge, but when you, not you personally, but when you went to the ballot and you voted yes on Prop 8, you judged.
Judy and Neil had two conversations that day. The clip you saw was from the first conversation in the morning. Later on, in another room, as the day was drawing to a close, they talked with each other again. I was watching them from a bit off from the corner of a large room as they concluded their dialogue, leaning in towards each other, listening intently. At the end of their conversation, they suddenly embraced each other, tears running down their cheeks. The relationship between Judy and Neil has borne fruits of trust and goodwill. Judy's attended Neil's church multiple times. 2 of those times she was asked to speak, and each time she received a standing ovation from the congregation. Eventually, Neil accepted a new position at another church in Texas, and at the final service that his final farewell service, he invited 2 others to speak, a woman rabbi and Judy. In her interfaith activities in Los Angeles, Judy regularly runs into members of Neil's church. Every time we see members of the congregation, she told me, it's like greeting a dear friend. Here's another clip from the end of the documentary, showing the conclusion of dialogues between Reverend Neil Thomas and Father Alexei, a Catholic priest.
I like the fact that we were able to sit and have this conversation in a civil manner. I disliked some of the things that were said during that whole campaign, some of the accusations that both of us, both sides of it, if you will, were hurling at each other. Why do you have to demean someone in order to make your point? Why do you have to belittle? Why do you have to put someone else down in order to build your side up? You don't do that. And had we to do that again, I probably would have been stronger in my opposition to such tactics. It didn't really play much of a role in the whole thing, but I could have used my voice to say, wait a minute here, we don't need to take this tactic. We have to be true to ourselves. They are trying to be true to themselves. What else can we ask?
But 2 years ago when we had this initial conversation, the thing I've learned over this last 2 years has been very profound in the way that, not only do we do, in my way, interreligious work, but the way that we actually just have relationship with people. Because most of us go into a conversation wanting to win.
Yeah.
And when you come out, when you come to the dawning that you don't need to win, there's nothing to win.
Yeah.
And when you and I rub shoulders with one another, we realize that we have so much more in common that we could actually work together on.
Absolutely.
That would change the face of this world.
Absolutely. The opportunity for us is to realize that and to work to set aside certain dogmatic differences, as you pointed out, and to work together for the common good. Think of what a marvelous effect it would have on the city of Los Angeles alone. So I would ask your forgiveness if I've offended you in any way this last year, or on this whole issue.
Well, thankfully you haven't. But I think that we've been honest to one another. We've been respectful of one another.
Yes.
And I know from our side, my side personal, there were some moments, in that whole debate where, where it was hard to keep peace. And so that forgiveness is mutual, and I offer and extend and ask the same in return.
The way of openness can be applied to conversations on any topic. It addresses both the personal desire to live with unique integrity and the social need to cooperate and thrive in groups.
It is critical that the premise of the dialogue is not to force people to change their convictions and core beliefs. Rather, it is to create the safe space for all to engage as persuasively and openly as they can in a civil and respectful way. Only then can we have a productive public conversation that can contribute to a flourishing multi-religious society.
We hope that the impact of these dialogues will be to elevate the level of discussion in our society, so we can get to the point where, even though we have serious disagreements that we may never resolve, we'll still be able to discuss them in an atmosphere of trust and remain loyal friends.
So that's how the Way of Openness worked in a dialogue over one of the thorniest, most contentious interreligious issues out there. An even thornier situation is intra-religious dialogue between people who share a religious tradition. This is where everything blows up. This is where the knives and brass knuckles come out. In January 2015, during a time of heated debate over women's issues within Latter-day Saint communities, my Auntie Annie sent me an email. "Did you get the essay from Carolina Allen that I sent yesterday?" "Yes," I responded. I had read this essay. It discussed maternal feminism, which to me at the time sounded suspiciously like emphasizing women's domestic roles like their abilities to jiggle babies, while ignoring their brains and ability to make sound decisions. This essay that Auntie Annie had forwarded to me had been written by someone named Carolina Allen. Looking at the name, thinking about the suburban, well-to-do community in Spanish Fork where Auntie Annie lives, I imagined that this Carolina Allen was a 60-year-old white lady with 6 kids and 3 grandchildren who listened to Rush Limbaugh. The grandchildren might not have listened to Rush Limbaugh, but I thought that she did. I replied to Auntie Annie. I felt that a lot of Sister Allen's perspective is influenced by the particular problems that she faces as a North American white woman who lives in an affluent society. Imagine my surprise when Carolina Allen emailed me directly. She said, "I am a 35-year-old first-generation Latina Brazilian immigrant. My family immigrated to the US back in 1986 with 8 suitcases and $400 to our name. We have undergone many challenges through the years, poverty and even homelessness at one point, but now I see that these experiences have been in reality opportunities to overcome." She then graciously asked for my input on some ideas she was developing for her organization, Big Ocean Women. Did I feel stupid? Carolina and I got to know each other. We discovered we were both the same age. Our kids were about the same ages. We both drove red minivans. Using the dialogue conventions of the Way of Openness, we had a Skype conversation discussing our different approaches to Latter-day Saint women's issues and recorded it. You can find it online. It's called Carolina and Melissa Have a Go in Vimeo. Today I see Carolina not only as a friend, but as a valuable colleague though our ideological views often diverge. When I was writing a tricky essay on gender for my book, Crossings, I ran my draft past Carolina. She pointed out several places where I had inadvertently said something that people like her would find off-putting. The essay became much stronger because of her candid feedback. I played the same role for her when her organization, Big Ocean Women, launched their new website. We've had a fair share of heated conversations, but when I was first diagnosed with cancer in 2017, she was among the first people to reach out and offer strong, unflinching support. I trust her to wish the best for me, act with integrity, and do a lot of good in the world. Once she said, I'm paraphrasing, "There are enough problems in the world for all kinds of women, from maternal feminists, egalitarian feminists. Let's stop arguing about who's more correct. Just go out and do something." Doing things in the world of real people and real places takes time, energy, and resources. It's much more difficult than raging at people in snarky social media comment chains. It takes an investment of intellectual, emotional, and even spiritual energy as well. These investments have become rarer in the information age, as disagreeing has become more convenient. The anonymity and distance of an internet environment remove us from the liability of disagreement and from the consequences of being disagreeable. If we want to be really cowardly, we can create an anonymous account, trash someone on Twitter, and take no personal responsibility. Hit and run. The fast-moving culture wars of the internet age have also primed us to strike first, ask questions later, at the expense of thoughtful deliberation. Just to raise a recent example, the other day I was at the Draper Public Library and I saw a book on the display shelf, "The World's Worst Conspiracies, the Truth They Don't Want You to Know." The back cover talked about the Illuminati. One of the section breaks bore the subtitle, "Faked Mass Shootings." Outraged, I plucked the book off the display stand and marched over to talk to a librarian. I demanded to know who had ordered this crazy book. Would they order science books that taught the moon was made of cheese? I asked. Would they have books that taught people how to be terrorists? The librarian said I could fill out a feedback form. While he looked on his computer for the form, I paged through this horrible book. Reading more closely, I noticed that the section on mass shootings did not say they were faked. Reading even more closely, I realized that at the end of every discussion of conspiracy theory, the author debunked the theory. The book was actually very cleverly designed to show people that the vast conspiracies they imagined were improbable. I said, actually, I judged the book by its cover. It appears to be about disproving conspiracy theories. I told the librarian he could stop looking for the form on his computer. Yes, he said slowly, trying to conceal his glee. The form does say, please make sure you have read the whole book before you complain. My early onset outrage is a symptom of today's culture that prioritizes platforms over people. The Way of Openness prioritizes people over platforms. The model works because the premise works. Most people are pretty clear-headed and their hearts are pretty good. As a Latter-day Saint who believes that we have a loving Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father who give us inspiration and revelation through the Holy Spirit, I believe that the model also works because when people open themselves up to each other and make themselves vulnerable to each other, they invite the presence of the Spirit. I have seen the Way of Openness succeed over and over again in situations that I felt were impossible. There have been times when in the midst of the dialogue process, I have fumed to think of the other party's hard-heartedness, stubbornness, arrogance, or willful blindness. I felt in these times that a positive outcome was not possible. And then, miraculously, in a moment of shared vulnerability, the Spirit came into the room and transformed us all. The solution is not new arguments or new information, but new experiences and new relationships. People have their views because of their experiences. You can't explain their experiences away. You can't explain what their experiences mean to them. However, when two people with different worldviews form a relationship, the relationship itself can become the basis for something new. Relationships create trust. If I care about someone, I'm more likely to view their experience as valuable and their worldview as valid. I have a Facebook friend named Tom, whose opinions I value highly because very often I find them infuriating. We have nearly opposite views on politics and many social issues. His family was in the same state, which is like a diocese for the Latter-day Saints, growing up. His sister and I took piano lessons from the same teacher. We've been friends on social media for years. Generally speaking, the pattern of our interactions goes like this. I'll post something mildly political. I get a flood of affirmation from like-minded friends. And then there'll be a comment from Tom saying, but, in other words, he also finds my opinions infuriating and inexplicable. And yet we don't scream at each other over cyberspace. We have a relationship. The other day when I wrote an impassioned post promoting an MWAG editorial, quoting Alexis de Tocqueville, he messaged me privately and said, not posted to your heartfelt post, but that America is great because America is good, quote, is spurious. Tocqueville never wrote it. It first showed up in a 1941 book. As an academic, I'm used to taking criticism, but still I was touched that he would privately message me instead of publicly blowing me out of the water, as so often happens in online discourse these days. I value Tom's friendship, not because we have many shared views in common, but because we have so few shared views in common. When I was in elementary school, My father passed on some advice that his father had given him, which was, make friends who are better than you. Now that I'm a parent myself, to this I would also add, spend time with people who are different from you. We all need people in our lives to check our assumptions, to show us our blind spots, to remind us that every person has worth and dignity, and the purpose of life is not to be correct, but good. Sometimes we place such a premium on being correct and monitoring others who might be incorrect. Let someone cross a certain line and they deserve to be blown up. Or do they? Maybe they do, and maybe they don't. But let me ask another question. Will blowing up our sisters and brothers pave the way to a better world where God's children can flourish? Will expressing contempt for someone's beliefs make them more or less susceptible to your attempts to influence them? Someone is more likely to listen to you if they trust you, and someone's more likely to trust you if they know you care about them and are listening to them. This takes time, and it is very inefficient. You can't listen to people en masse. You can't care about people en masse. It has to be one-on-one. We today are living in a historic moment, an era in which the people of the world are both connected and divided as never before. The information age has given birth to 500 new technologies to help us shout, and 200 new ways to call names. We have perfected visually striking ways of distorting our enemies' words, and know the sounds of some voices so well we can turn off the volume as soon as we hear the first few syllables. But where does this leave us? Surrounded by idiots in a world full of garbage. Who wants to live in that kind of world? I don't want to live in a world full of patriarchal jerks, partisan scumbags, and ignorant hypocrites. So often it's hard to remember, but actually as a Latter-day Saint, I believe we live in a world filled with the children of God. I believe the purpose of life is to learn to look after each other, to help each other become better. But our experiences are so incredibly different. No wonder we disagree. The more people we know and love, the more likely we are to know and love someone with completely wrong-headed ideas, who supports political and social views we absolutely despise. This is the blessing, but also the curse, of religious communities and other communities, like large families, whose members we do not personally select. Living with the tensions created by difference can be uncomfortable. They can suddenly derail Thanksgiving dinner, or the Sunday school discussion, or a Facebook thread. But imagine life without such tensions. How horrible would it be if we really were surrounded by people who were nothing but racists, socialists, ignoramuses, bigots, liars, instead of by our beloved uncles and aunts, loyal friends, eager students, helpful classmates, and hardworking colleagues? In a time of global pandemic, our shared experience is more apparent than ever. Our shared fate is also more apparent than ever. Some have called for more walls and stronger borders, but germs, social instability, and pollution are no respecters of borders. Everyone who currently lives and breathes are passengers on a tiny marble-shaped blue spaceship, flying around a burning sun in the middle of freezing cold emptiness. We are stuck with each other. We have to accept this. Be willing to see someone through more than one lens. This initial lens is different for everyone. For me, it's often gender issues. See, but see again. Seize opportunities to cultivate relationships with people who are different from you, who might possibly hate you, who are uninterested in the things that keep you up at night. Do not spend your valuable time going back and forth with anonymous interlocutors, people you can never know. Only disagree with people you will surely meet again. Only contend with those who know your love for them is stronger than the bands of death.